I want to thank our sponsors, Driscoll's and International Fresh Produce Association. Without their support, we cannot do what we do, so we really are appreciative of their support. I just want to mention a little more housekeeping. We are having a smart home party over at the Venetian starting at 5. If you, after this session, want to go over there, I got to see us some reason to pay for drinks. So you can have a free drink over there. It's a little bit far away, but if you want to go over there, feel free to join us. I'm super excited to welcome this next session up on stage, and in particular Amy Wu, who I've got to know a little bit over the past year through Google Food Lab and just talking to her about podcasts. She is a really great journalist and a filmmaker, and just has done some really interesting work, which I think will inform some of her questions today. So I want to welcome Amy up and the rest of the panelists, and we'll talk about soil tech. Come on up, Amy. Give them a big round of applause.
Thank you, Michael, for that wonderful introduction, and to the Spoon as well. It's exciting to be here at CES, and today I'm really honored to be the moderator for the panel on soil tech, regenerative farming, and new soil technologies. I'm here to introduce a couple of our speakers today. To my left is Wendy Ulrich, the customer success lead, and she's at Radical Agronomics, and she's a customer service lead with a strong background in agriculture. She comes from a farming family, and she's going to talk a little bit more about her background in farming and her passion for that. And she also, in her job, collaborates closely with the engineering department as well as others at her company. So really excited to have her. And then is Rob Krasnick, the Chief Technology Officer at Earth Optics. And Rob is here to talk a bit about his expertise in soil. And Earth Optics creates next-gen agricultural platforms. His team develops high-resolution data maps covering compaction, carbon, moisture, and DNA sequencing. He has more than 20 years of experience in this area, so I'm super excited to welcome them today for a really exciting and insightful discussion. All right. So my first question is just tell me a little bit more about yourselves. How did you get into agriculture and into this area of soil innovation as well?
Absolutely. Thank you, Amy. So I'm Wendy Ulrich, and I come from Central Illinois. I come from a farming family. My brothers all farm with my dad. I married a farmer. I've worked my whole entire career in agriculture. So I'm very passionate about agriculture, and I'm super lucky to work for Precision Planting, specifically part of the company called Radical Agronomics, and we specialize in soil fertility. I'll get to talk about that more later.
Yeah, and I'm Rob Brannick. I'm the CTO at Earth Optics. I'm a fifth-generation Nebraskan originally. My ancestors were Homestead Act farmers in the state and still have some farms in the family there. But I'm an engineer, and that's really how I come at the challenge of understanding soil is how do we go build the next generation of systems to really unlock the full potential of soil. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when I talk more about what Earth Optics does.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. Please share a little bit of your insight today on what are some of the greatest challenges that you think farmers, growers do face, and how your innovation connects with that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So fertilizer is one of the biggest input costs for farmers. So I know fertilizer can be a little bit of a dirty word, especially when we're talking about environmental health and soil health, but having a healthy plant, a healthy soil, part of that is soil nutrition and soil fertility. So the technology that Radical Agronomics has helps farmers better understand what's actually in the soil so that we can make more accurate decisions and apply the right amount of fertilizer, the right amount of nutrients for the soil.
Yeah, at Earth Optics, what our goal for farmers is really to make soil health profitable. Soil health is, I think rightly, a big industry focus right now. There are lots of challenges that we have globally with soils, and soil health is really a critical thing to improve in our farming ecosystem. The challenge traditionally for growers, as we see it, has been how do you make soil health a profit center for your farm? Because ultimately, you are a bottom line business as a farm, And even if a lot of groups come and talk to you about all the other things you can be doing other than being financially sustainable, that is going to fall by the wayside unless you can actually make soil health a profitable entity for your farm. And so that's what we focus on. Our view is that the biggest challenge right now in soil health is that it's very hard to quantify. It's very almost kind of a ethereal, metaphysical concept when folks talk about it, and there aren't a lot of hard numbers on, how do you actually understand what is healthy soil and what are the outcomes that soil is actually driving. And so that's what we focus on with our measurement technology at Orthoptics, is how do we take that concept of soil health and quantify it effectively so that farmers can actually get profitable from having healthy soils.
Yeah, I think one of the things a lot of people don't know is that the technology for soil sampling and understanding how much nutrients, whether that's more on the biology side or chemistry side, that technology has not changed in the past 100 years. So 100 years ago, they were going out with a soil probe, collecting a soil sample, sending it off to a laboratory, and until recently, that's what farmers have been doing. So it's time for some innovation, time for some new technology in the soil industry.
On the topic of farmers and usage, how user-friendly are the innovations that you're discussing a little bit? Because I do know that farmers are extremely busy already, right? You mentioned it in your family that you do farms. So talk a little bit about the user-friendliness, and also is any training needed as well?
Yeah, so to talk a little bit more about what products we actually have, so Radical Agronomics has the world's first fully automated soil laboratory. So it is about an 8x10 box, and you put the soil in one side and you get your analysis within about 6 minutes per sample. So I know that can sound pretty complicated. We're taking what used to be in a commercial laboratory, about 20 to 30 manual steps, and we've combined it. We've made that fully automated, which eliminates a lot of the human error due to consistencies and timing. So we've made it a lot more repeatable, a lot more consistent. Now, with that, though, we like to say it's like a dishwasher. You load your samples, and you just hit play, and it runs. So that's our goal, is to make it extremely user-friendly and easy to interact with, because just like you said, as we bring more technology to the industry, we need to keep it simple to interact with.
Yeah, if you look at our technology platform, we run 2 soil labs in the US and 1 in Brazil. And what our core innovation is is a proximal sensing technology that you put on a soil sampling rig. And what that allows you to do is reduce the amount of samples that you have to put through a lab, but get the same quality of data coming out the other end. And so one of the big pain points right now in the soil analysis world is simply cost. And a lot of that cost is driven by the amount of samples that you actually have to put through a lab. So our focus has been, how do we reduce cost for farmers by reducing the amount of samples that they need to put through a lab? And what we've developed is a proximal sensing technology that fits in with the existing sampling ecosystem. So you can actually drive your side-by-side or your ATV at the same speed in the field, and our proximal sensing technology will pick up this high-precision map of the field as you drive through it, and then use that to reduce the amount of samples that you actually have to take.
So cost is certainly a challenge, Rob, as you mentioned. What are some of the other barriers to getting more farmers to actually adopt or be open to the new technologies and innovations within soil sampling, which is so critical, to success in agriculture?
From our perspective, the key thing that you have to do is you have to deliver ROI to farmers, and that means that they have to be able to take your analysis and make decisions that drive their profitability. And the 2 ways that we try to help farmers do that is through increasing their yield and getting paid for carbon storage. So one of the interesting areas that's emerging in row crop farms is that increasingly you can get paid as a grower to store carbon in your soils. We're actually the US leader in soil carbon analysis. We do the majority of soil carbon analysis in the US. Our focus is in row crops and grasslands. And today, farmers are starting to get paid. It's just the beginning of what we think is going to be a meaningful income stream for them in the future. And that, we think, is going to drive increasingly adoption of measuring soil health, which includes carbon in their soil.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with what you said about ROI costs both being huge barriers to entry for new technology. One of the things that I've been thinking about today as I've sat through some of the session is all of the data that new technologies are bringing to farmers. So somebody once said to me, we don't just need more data, we need better data. So one of our goals at Radical Agronomics is to help farmers understand the data that we're bringing to them. So we're doing some more testing so that when the farmers run the soil through the lab and get a nutrient level back, they can better make a decision how much to apply. Because once again, they're working off of old, outdated information, studies that are 50 years old. So if they have data but can't make decisions off it or can't make good decisions off of it, the data isn't helping them. So that's one of our goals.
How do you deliver some of that analysis and data to them, and what sort of feedback are you getting from the farmers themselves?
The way that we deliver our product is through a digital interface, and typically that is delivered in conjunction with their agronomists. So the folks that are going out and actually using our product with growers are typically the agronomists, and then they're sitting down at the end with the farmer and deciding very practical things like how much fertility do I apply on this field, or what kind of seed trait do I need because I need to understand what type of pest pressure I have in this field. And so there are all sorts of decisions that growers can make with this data, and they're typically doing that with their agronomist in a digital format. So they're kind of looking at maps and saying, hey, what's my crop plan for the next year based on all this data that I'm seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I talked about the Radical Lab a minute before. So the soil samples are going through the laboratory. Then all of the results from the laboratory analysis are going to our platform called the Radical Cloud. So the results are in a digital format like most agronomists and farmers are used to. And then whether it's the farmer himself or an agronomist or a dealer with an agronomist and a farmer, they can look at those results and make decisions. So the Radical Lab is one of our products. We also have a product called the GeoPress, which helps assist with the soil collection process in the field. So it speeds up the soil collection while we're taking those soil samples. And then we look forward to expanding on that suite of products in the future.
One thing I'll add to that is that one of the areas where we're getting a lot of customer asks is to increasingly turn that advice delivered via an agronomist into scripts that they can just automatically load into their equipment and then go auto-apply on the field itself. And so that's, something that is increasingly common, out there. And I think you'll see that end-to-end connection between the data and the actual equipment itself grow over time.
It sounds more and more seamless and streamlined as well. In terms of the types of crops for the innovations, you mentioned that you're in row crops, is that right?
Yeah, we focus primarily on row crops and grasslands. That's we haven't done much in specialties yet. Where we have focused is really on becoming experts in the big row crop systems. That's true both in the U.S. and Brazil. In the U.S., it's primarily corn and soybeans. We do some cotton and sugar beets as well. In Brazil, this year we're going to be launching into sugarcane after doing a lot of work the last 2 seasons, primarily in soybeans down there.
So Radical Agronomics has been in process for 7 years. We released it commercially last summer, 2023, I guess, 2 summers ago. And so we're just starting our commercial release process. We're from the Midwest, so we're used to corn and soybeans. We've done a lot of research there. We have a research farm in Pontiac, Illinois, called our PTI farm. It's an awesome experience. I encourage you all to visit there during our summer tours. So we're used to our corn and soybeans. That's where we started. But soil fertility, soil health impacts all crops, no matter what size of operation you're at. So we're looking forward to expanding globally this year. We will have several labs international.
Oh, that's wonderful. So in terms of innovation and so forth, I'm thinking about farmers themselves who are exploring new strategies and innovative ways to grow, and focus on regenerative farming, including, for example, cover cropping, crop rotation, and minimum till and no-till. So in your opinion and based on your own experiences and knowledge, how do farmers choose between the innovations like you are discussing or introducing and regenerative farming strategies that are already being used? Is there a balance? Is there an art to that? What's your perspective?
Yeah, what we see today is the majority of regenerative practices are practice-based. So cover crops and no-till are sort of the predominant examples of what our customers are doing. And that is typically what you can earn carbon credits for as well. That's where there's kind of the most science-backed research on saying, hey, if you do this practice, you're going to sequester, call it half a ton of carbon per acre per year. The challenge for a lot of growers is that tends to lock them into a practice over the long term, and farmers definitely like optionality overall. And so what I think is really interesting right now is you're seeing a new set of products coming to market that are focused on carbon storage instead of practice-based methods. So, I think the most interesting ones that are out there now are primarily enhanced rock weathering and some biological products that you're seeing with the potential to sequester carbon out of the atmosphere and keep it in soils over the long term. So I think you'll see more adoption of this type of what I would call carbon farming as we move a little bit away from the practice-based approaches and towards some of the product-based approaches. And one of the things that we see, holding the industry back right now is the need to accurately quantify the amount of carbon that is getting stored, either by these products or practices. And so that's a big focus of ours.
Yeah, so I agree that changing practices for a farmer can be very costly and can be very difficult. So like I mentioned, my husband does farm, and they are still conventional till. So my husband would love to change practices and move to more of a strip till type of management system. He knows it's better for the environment. He knows it's better for his crops. However, the cost involved with that is, number one, he's going to have to buy a strip till implement of some type, but he also doesn't have the right tractor either. So now he has to buy a tractor as well. The cost to that is just astronomical right now. So what Precision Planting does is we provide retrofit technology or solutions that can be added onto existing equipment. And that allows farmers to get into technology without having to completely swap out the equipment they're using. So with Radical, what's awesome is that farmers are already soil sampling. That's not a new practice that they have to incorporate. That doesn't require them to buy a new tractor or even new technology. They're just using our lab instead of the commercial laboratory to get a more accurate, reliable result.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I think that the retrofit concept is really important, and I would just tout one of our products on that on-vehicle sensor that I talked about is the ability to precisely measure compaction. And so one of the work products that we generate from our sampling are these detailed compaction maps. And my general view is that probably in the long term, instead of a kind of a strictly till, no-till approach, you're going to have much more of a precision till approach in a lot of the ways that we have kind of precision nutrient application. Right now, you're going to see that with tillage as well, and farmers aren't necessarily going to have to choose between kind of a till, no-till approach, but a big unlock is the ability to operationally execute precision tilling, and having some retrofit products in the market is actually a big deal, I think, and something that I'd like to see more of.
The innovations that we're discussing today, do they extend to small acreage farmers as well? Here in the U.S., there still are a lot of family farms, household farms, although diminishing. So does it apply to them also? What's your crystal ball on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So while the laboratory might not be owned by every small farmer out there, we want to make it accessible to any farmer of any size. So we look forward to the laboratory being at many different locations around the U.S. and around the globe that farmers of all different sizes of operations can access and use.
For us, our core customer in the U.S. is typically around a 3,000 acre operation. Our customers in Brazil, it's a little more than twice that, roughly. And so that's kind of in the mid-size, range of customers, maybe a little bit on the higher end side. That's really our core focus. And the reason for that is that what we're fundamentally trying to do is to scale up regenerative agriculture. A lot of the regenerative agriculture today is focused on relatively small operations where you're doing, complex, cover crop rotations or things like that. What we'd like to do is try to help scale that up to larger operations to have more impact. And that's why we're really focused on quantifying the impact of that to soils so that we can build more profitability into it. Because that's really how the bigger growers adopt technology fundamentally. And we think that's where there needs to be a lot more push on the regenerative side. So that's our focus, is kind of mid-size and up.
How long can this take? And the question I ask is that, as you mentioned, soil sampling is not new. There's a sequence and a process to it. It goes to a laboratory, and sometimes it can take a while. So can you share a little bit more about how long it takes, for example, for the farmer to get the results or some of the analytics back?
Yeah, so typically commercial laboratories could take several weeks to a month to get results. And so farmers would sample and then get the results back for the next year. Sometimes they could get a quick enough turnaround that they can apply that same season, but that's not the most common practice. So number one, we aim to change that and get results back for field within the same day so that farmers can make quicker decisions, which then are more accurate. One of the big wild cards in agriculture is the weather. So when you're building data sets of how the soil responds to different nutrient levels, different years have different weather patterns, and so you need to build up years and years of data to make better decisions.
Yeah, typically in the U.S., you'll see most growers sample either pre-plant or post-harvest. Those are the two big sampling seasons. And it's kind of roughly a third will sample pre-plant and 2/3 sample post-harvest. Those are kind of ballpark numbers. For our chemistry labs, which we run 2 of in the U.S., for this fall, our turnaround times were 3.2 days on average for the chemistry results. For the growers, a lot of it just depends on what they want to do with that data, whether they want to get out and apply some fertility right away or not. Some do, some don't. It kind of depends on the growers. I would say definitely faster is always better. There's so many unknowns, particularly with the weather. Even in terms of impacting sampling timeframes, it's very easy to get pushed back by, really wet weather and then eventually get locked in by cold weather. And so definitely it's always helpful to have a faster turnaround time for growers.
The other factor in this process too is not just how long it takes for the sample to be analyzed, but then the decision has to be made too. So if the farmer is making that decision himself, he has to sit down with a program, write the prescription, or meet with his agronomist in a lot of cases and make that decision as well. So it's not just the analysis of the sample, it's also the analysis of the results and writing the prescription as well.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. That's been a big investment area for us, is automating that analysis and prescription component itself, because it can be a big time suck. Often the agronomists, particularly the technical agronomists at larger organizations, are just slammed, particularly during sampling season. And so, they have a big backlog of stuff that they've got to go look at. And so one of the areas of focus for us has been, how do we use machine learning and some AI technologies to actually just automate some of what we call the crop planning activities that would typically happen with an agronomist? And the way that we think about it is that someday I think you will have digital agronomists. That's not our kind of like near-term goal. What we focus on right now is just kind of giving some digital superpowers to the agronomists that are out there so that they can kind of quickly check plans as opposed to try to come up with it whole cloth themselves and get really backlogged.
That's very interesting. Can you share a little bit more about that, Rob, about the machine learning and the role of AI?
Sure, yeah. I mean, if you look out there, multiple companies already have digital agronomists, some that are based on some of the foundation models. Bailey Stockdale, the CEO of Leaf, keeps a nice little running tally online. You can go look at them on LinkedIn. It's like who's getting the best score on the CCA, the Certified Crop Advisor test. And I think Claude is doing pretty well. There's a couple of other more specialized ones that are out there. But my view is that that's valuable. I mean, it has some value to have someone that you can just kind of ask questions about. But what really matters to farmers and ranchers are their operation. What they really want to know is, okay, what are the unique things about my operation that I need to be thinking about in terms of what seeds to buy, what crop protection to put down, what fertility to put down? That's the real value. And you can't get that knowledge unless you're deeply analyzing and digitizing what's going on in their soil. So that's what we see, as the real opportunity in terms of digital agronomy. Like, it's nice to have some little agronomist that you can chat with, but what's more important is that you have this digital twin of the soil of each individual field on an operation or on a ranch, and you can actually say something specific about what you want to do next season with that.
Yeah, so soil varies so much within a field, but especially across the U.S., across the state. So a lot of fertility recommendations are state-based or based on a group of states, which, yes, the recommendations in Illinois are going to be different than the recommendations in California, but the recommendations where I live in Illinois should also be different than the field next to me or the field 50 miles away from me. So not only do we need the assistant to make that decision, but we've all heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out, right? So we believe that we need better data to build those decisions, data specific to the farms, data specific to soil types, so that we can make more accurate decisions.
What other opportunities are there within soil preservation that might present itself to the industry? Maybe industry as defined as companies that create innovation that aim to tackle challenges in soil health. Are there other opportunities?
I mean, I think the biggest opportunity right now is soil carbon storage. If you look at it, at a very big picture, depending on what assumptions you want to make, food and agriculture is kind of roughly a quarter of total global greenhouse, gas emissions. Again, depending on what kind of assumptions you want to make, you could potentially mitigate all of that with the right amount of soil carbon sequestration. So I think there's a huge potential unlock in that space. Now, today, it's very early. If you look at the companies and the technologies that are in the space, it's really just early days of even understanding some basic issues around how to go do it. And there are challenges. There are challenges of, things like permanence and measurement, in terms of being able to understand how much carbon is getting sequestered and does it stay there, long term in the soil. But I think it's a huge opportunity, and today, to give you a sense, in the voluntary markets, you're getting maybe kind of $20 a ton. Probably long-term social cost of carbon is closer to $100 a ton. If you do the math and you're able to sequester a material amount of carbon per acre on farms, that could be a very material income stream for farmers in the future. So there's a lot of unknowns. It's very early days in terms of the market and just us as a society kind of thinking about this. But I think that's a huge opportunity, and that's one of the areas that we've focused on because we see it as an early monetization path for soil health for farmers and ranchers.
Yeah, so agriculture is always going to be vital to feed our growing world. As I'm sure many others have mentioned, the world population is growing, and we need to continue to be able to be profitable and sustainable and feed this growing population, all while doing it with less available labor, right? So we need to continue to innovate and provide products and tools for farmers. And I would spin this as there are so many careers available to so many people out there in the industry. So we need software engineers, we need data analysts, and yes, we need the agronomists that can run trials all over the world, but you don't need to have a farming background to work in the agriculture industry. There's so many opportunities.
That's excellent. To the point of connecting with farmers again and adopting new innovations and technologies and so forth, can you talk a little bit about the what I call education, maybe training process with the farmers that you work with or the farmers in general? I mean, one theme I'm thinking is simplicity. That's what I'm hearing a lot, right? Throughout walking throughout this convention is that folks want simple and easy to use. So how do you train and educate the farmers on using the innovation?
Yeah, I mean, my perspective is that farmers are actually quick adopters of technologies. They're really small businesses fundamentally, and they adopt based on ROI. And so if you can go show them that you're giving them ROI, they'll adopt your technology. There's tons of history of that in the agricultural space and in the ag tech space specifically. One of the biggest challenges for them is that it's a very multivariate problem that they have. They just have a lot of stuff going on every year in terms of weather, in terms of prices and things like that. And so often it's hard for them to separate out the signal from the noise of what's going on in any given season that they're growing something. And so that's often really the challenge that you've got to take on with growers, is showing them, okay, this is giving you an ROI, and you can sort that out from everything else that is going on from your operation. And that's actually why it's important to make it simple, because it's just like they've got a very complex background of stuff going on, very complex and multidisciplinary set of tasks that they're doing. If they have to sit down and learn about some new technology that's kind of niche from their perspective, they're just not going to do it. And so fundamentally, you got to deliver those outcomes to them in the form of ROI and prove it to them.
Absolutely. There's so many different factors that go into yields, because at the end of the season, what matters is how much did this crop yield. But was it weather? Was it fertility? Was it seed treatments? There's so many different factors that go into this, and helping the farmers understand how those different factors interact with each other helps them understand how to figure out which tools that they need to invest in. So at Precision Planting, we believe in educating the farmers, and particularly with radical agronomics, I believe that means educating them about soil science practices, so that when they get a soil test back, they understand why this area is maybe different in fertility or different in organic matter than this other area of the field, and then what they can do, whether that's an application or whether that's just a farming practice, to improve the health and fertility of their soil.
Yeah, one of the big areas of education that we get asked about is on biological products. And so, this is a big new emerging input category, both in the US and in Brazil, where instead of putting down, small molecule chemistry on a field, you're actually putting in, a little microbial product of some sort to affect an outcome. And this is probably the number one ask that we get for our technology is, how do I understand what biological products I should be using and where in my fields? Because increasingly there are a ton of new products coming online in this space, and while we've had a chemistry-based test that helps place the fertility products for a long time, as Wendy mentioned, what we haven't had up until recently has been a biology-based test that helps you place biological products. And so that's one area of focus and education for us. And, candidly, we're all pretty early still in understanding exactly how to leverage these new biological products, although we, like a lot of growers out there, are big believers in them. And so that's a big focus of us in terms of educating growers about where to place biologicals.
Briefly on the international front, both of you have alluded to that, Brazil and also expanding into international. What international markets are you interested in the future, or is on your wish list, and why?
I would say everywhere. But one of the things we've seen about international markets is that many countries have even more limited access to soil laboratories and nutrient analysis than even the US. So providing them with a laboratory that they can run nutrient analysis and then make more decisions, better decisions off of is even more critical perhaps. So all over the world, everywhere needs it.
Yeah, we've been pretty focused in terms of our go-to-market strategy. We started commercially in the US about 5 years ago, and our core focus has been the Midwest row crops and large-scale rangelands. That's really what we focused our technology on in the US. Somewhat for that reason, we entered the Brazilian market about 2 years ago, so we just wrapped up our second season commercially in Brazil, and it's roughly for that crop system focus reason. A lot of the same type of row crops and rangeland systems are run in Brazil that are run in the U.S. And so when you're looking at soil health and trying to quantify it, it's new territory, and we feel like it's very crop system specific, and so that's why we focused on those two main geographies.
I'm also really excited about how radical agronomics can help developing countries. So countries with limited resources that are still building their agronomic practices. I actually got the opportunity to be in Washington, D.C. Last year, and there were a lot of different ambassadors and people interested on taking this laboratory to developing countries to help provide them with options that they don't already have.
Yeah, I would actually really second that. I mean, we get asked a lot to go to other regions like Africa and places like that. And speaking as someone who runs, three soil labs across the world, I really can't do the capital investment in a lot of those places to run a full soil lab. And so I think the concept of a soil lab in a box is a great fit for a lot of those geographies that we really can't service.
What are you most looking forward to and hopeful about right now when it comes to soil health and innovation?
Yeah, so I'm excited to continue to bring tools to farmers to help them make better decisions. But specifically in the near future, Precision Planting has its winter conference. So this is where we showcase our new technologies and talk about all things agronomy. And we will have radical agronomics on display there. So that the central location is in Central Illinois. We encourage you to attend in person, or we do have 10 different locations across the U.S. that you can attend to. So that's coming up in a couple weeks with Precision Planting. And then we also will continue to be at different shows, and even in Germany for an ag tech, the biggest ag tech show in the world, Agritechnica.
What I'm most excited about in terms of soil health is the amount of investment that's going into the space. I mean, people have been talking about soil health for a long time, and some of the larger companies and some of the smaller ag tech players as well have been looking at how do we invest in that area for the last few years. And what I'm seeing now is that there is a lot of investment going into soil health. It's not just talk, that people are actually figuring out financial models that will actually pay farmers to improve their soil health. And I think that's really critical to scaling soil health and regenerative ag more broadly across the landscape. And I'm really encouraged by the level of investment. I've seen what we obviously focus on our area, which is trying to measure it more comprehensively and cheaply for growers and ranchers. But that doesn't matter unless people are actually willing to put dollars behind it. And increasingly, that's what we're seeing is people actually putting dollars behind it. And so one of the things that people maybe don't know if you're out of the industry is that soil health is an incredibly complex topic. You've got this interplay of the physical, chemical, and biological properties of soil. And it's only in the last few years that we've had the kinds of tools like DNA sequencers and things like that to actually start to understand how that all fits together from a systems biology perspective. And so there's a ton of R&D going into that, but there's also increasingly investment in improving soil quality. And as we've talked about a little bit, I think that's just something that's really important, not just for our agri-food system, but also for our broader environment.
Yeah, there's been such a lack of innovation in this area for so long that it's really exciting to see in the past several years that the innovation is taking off and the industry is growing and we're providing new technology. Excellent.
Well, thank you. It looks like we are running out of time. But here, so I want to, first of all, thank you both for a really insightful discussion, conversation, and also sharing your knowledge about soil health and a bit of crystal ball. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Thank you so much for having us here.
Yeah, I think that what I'd really like to see is that investment in soil health, continue going forward. That I just think there's a ton of opportunities, and I think that there'll be challenges and bumps along the way. You see that in, for example, carbon markets, even outside of soils. But I think that continued investment in the space will really have a big impact on the food system. And someone that I talked to recently, I think said it well, which is that, previously it was all 100% about, production. How do we maximize production? Increasingly, we've also got to think about the overall impact of what we're doing. And the only way that we can get farmers to pay attention to that is if we pay them to go do that. And so I think, finding ways to go invest in soil health for farmers and ranchers is important and something that I'm excited to see more of.
Thank you very much. Really well said. So I'll give a big round of applause to our speakers today, to Wendy and Rob. And feel free to come up and connect with them directly if you like. All right. Thank you, everybody. And thank you very much for coming to today's panel. It's the last of the AgTech series today. And have a good rest of the conference.